democracy. So basically, from what I understand, democracy is power to the people, right? We vote, we change our
Yeah.
leaders, we're unhappy, we go to the voting booth and we say we want to change. I kind of feel on the other end of the spectrum would be people don't have power. A small group or maybe just one individual has the power, which I guess would be anti-democratic systems. And we hear a lot of words. Are they all anti-democratic systems? Because we hear fascism, dictatorship, autocracy, oligarchy. So first of all, are they significantly different variation of anti-democratic system?
Yes, there are variations, but obviously they all have one thing in common, right? It's concentration of power at the top. So that's one thing they've in common. But then we can find some nuance between they are different concepts. Uh, yes, we can. They all prefer system situations in which power is more concentrated than in democracy. That's undeniable. It's a bit like, if I put it, let me give you an example. It's like a thermometer. The more power becomes concentrated and the more institutions are weakened. The further we move away from, we move from a complete democracy. So we can imagine at normal temperature, you have a liberal democracy. As I said, free elections, solid institutions, for instance. When the temperature rises, then that's when it's not a political system, but that's when we can do this us versus them. Populism can appear. You know, it's like a small. We're starting to have a flu. We're coughing. There's something that we're not feeling well. Temperature rise. So it's a political style that opposes the people to the elite. The fever continues to rise, then we speak of illiberal tendencies. Pressure on institutions, harsh rhetoric, let's say. That's I think I can safely say that's what we're seeing in the United States. But at some point, you get to fascism, it's not just a high fever. That's when the thermometer breaks completely. No more free elections, concentrated power, and crushed opposition. But there are different ways to get there. Maybe fascism. Start with fascism because that's one of Trump's favorite word, right? Uh, Fascism is a very specific political ideology. It is an authoritarian system. It rejects democracy, seeks to concentrate power around a strong leader and a highly centralized state, often in the name of the nation. So I said it was, Trump's one of Trump's favorite words was one of Trump's opponent's favorite words. I want to be clear about that. So historically, fascist regimes are also sought to mobilize all the society behind a big national project, and they have strongly repressed their position. Fascism it's a very specific ideology. It's not simply an authoritarian regime. So it goes beyond this us versus them. It's us as a people, literally, very often vis-a-vis the rest of the world. And other when it is us versus the rest of the world, and said, we need to combat the enemy within, which are they're considered as being traitors. Think about yes. Go
Is
ahead,
it
Jeff.
is it very different than a dictatorship? So basically,
Um,
is a fascist leader that different from a
Now,
dictatorship
well,
leader?
I would say uh, uh, fascism can express itself, I would say, mainly as a form of dictatorship, right? This message of this us versus them rejecting democracy and all that, you're going to find that, and you need very concentrated power. Dictatorship is a more general term, so it can take different forms. Uh, it's simply a system in which, as I just said, dictatorship power is concentrated in the hands of one leader, a small group, or a small group where citizens cannot truly replace their leaders through free elections. So it's a key difference. Fascism is a particular form of dictatorship but not all dictatorships are fascist. So you can have dictatorship without having this kind of a big national project, right? Only one vision.
It feels, from what I understand, it feels like fascism is maybe more aggressive
Yeah, I would say,
than
yeah.
dictatorship.
Yeah, because you can have, as I said, you can have different forms of this dictatorship where power will be more dispersed. Think about autocracy. That's another term. I would say it's even broader here. When you talk about autocracy, it's a political system where real power is concentrated in the hands of a leader or small group, even if formal institutions such as elections or parliament may exist.
In an autocracy,
Authoritarian, yeah. In autocracy, you still have, elections are in shambles, but they still exist. So an autocracy may sometimes hold elections, but those elections not always allow for genuine alternative power. When we talk about, the Soviet election results, right? They had elections, but
they
the
win with
leader.
like 97% of the
That's
vote or
right.
something like
That's
that.
right. That's right. And now think about, so there's another term that's different. But that's what for many, that's what more and more we observe in the United States. It's oligarchy. That's another term of concentrated power. In this case, an oligarchy is a system in which power is concentrated in the hands of a small group, very often defined by wealth or economic influence, rather than an official political function. You know, so we talked about the oligarch as well. There was oligarchs, and in Russia, uh, we saw Putin was very aligned on the oligarch, and then when held in the power, he pushed them aside. It's interesting. The United States kind of see the reverse. Trump, in his first term, really ran anti the tech oligarchy. Then 1920 and especially 2024 elections, it ran very, very close to them. Right? His inaugurations,
They were all there. They
they
were
were
all in the
all there.
crowd. First
They were
row,
all
almost.
there. And that's why Trump said it very well. He said, in my first term in 2016, they were all against me. No, they all want to be my friend.
Yeah, and their wealth exploded since.
Exactly, because they say it's all in their interest, because Trump in some ways need them. They need Trump. With all the deregulations, free hands, or even attacking Canada for having the so-called Netflix tax is to them, to Trump, those big tech industries are part of the government. So when some observers speak of oligarchy in the United States, they do not mean that the country has ceased to be a democracy. It means that very powerful economic actors, and I'm talk about the tech, but it goes beyond that. Large corporations, large fortunes exert an increasing influence over political decisions.
Basically, money calls the shot.
Yeah, just like it was the case in the late 19th century. And then there was a backlash against that. So we'll see if history repeats itself or not. So very simply, dictatorship describes mainly how power is concentrated, and autocracy describes a system where real power is the hands of the few. Fascism describes a very specific authoritarian ideology, and an oligarchy describes a concentration of power in a small group, often an economic group.
So
Yes.
from what I understand, fascism needs an enemy.
Yeah, in some ways,
And
yeah.
dictatorship wouldn't necessarily need an enemy.
But dictatorship, I would say, very often can be vis-a-vis an outside, an outside enemy, but not always. So you can seize the power and then start to control more and more institutions until now. But it can be through a revolutions, through civil war. That's what we saw in China, for instance, under Mao Zedong. Different ways to get there. But fascists, it's really can be held by a certain segment of the society that represents the true citizens. That's what we saw in Italy, and obviously that's what we saw in Germany, and that's what some would say. I think I would refer again here to Tim Snyder, and Tim Snyder is not refraining talk about fascism in the United States. So
Well, we see it with ICE. We see it how he attacks people with
that's right.
autism. We see it how he attacks the LGBTQ community.
Yeah.
We see it how he attacks journalists.
That's right.
And just the numbers that we know, like just the official number that comes out of what happens in ICE detention center, and so that just what we know is already pretty horrific. And I can't even imagine.
Just having a little darker skin kind of makes you the enemy of ICE and the Trump regime, right? So I'm a little bit more subdued than Tim Snyder, but Tim Snyder is much more of an expert on the matter than I am. For those who don't know, Snyder was a professor at Yale, basically highly critical of Trump, and then accepted lucrative offer to move to the University of Toronto, where he can speak more freely
and be safer.
Yeah. So going back to a thermometer, we can imagine that the further we move from a democracy where power is broadly distributed, the closer we move towards systems where power is concentrated, so that's dictatorship, autocracy, oligarchy. But each of them, yes.
I would bring back to something very interesting you said a while back. You said, in democracy, power changes without violence.
That's right.
So from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, if people lose their democracy, the only way to get it back is, very sadly, through violence. Historically, I'm pretty sure that's what the history books show.
Yeah, violence or not, you can see the Soviet Union, there was some collapse from within, and there was some hope with the collapse of the Soviet Union, and obviously, which led to a bunch of other countries under the boots of the Soviets, where we still had true democracy, sometimes with violence, more often than violence, but not necessarily with violence either. So it's not just like there's no one true recipe and say, well, here now the way out is going to be true violence. Can be the case often, but not necessarily all the time.
So protect and cherish our democracies.
Absolutely.
That's what we should be doing, no matter where you are.
Yes. Like we polish a very precious stone, and we need to constantly polish that precious stone. We should never take anything for granted.